السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الصادقين المظلومين المنتجبين المنتخبين الذين أذهب الله عنكم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على وصي مصطفى عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم أبي الحسنين مولى القونين إمام الثقلين يأسوب الدين سيد المتقين رأس المحسنين سلطان الأولياء أمير المؤمنين أول المسلمين أسد الله الغالب غالب كل غالب مظهر العجائب علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي لا يحتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد سائله ولا يخيب آمله. أما بعد فيقول الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى. Brothers, sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You find over these last few nights we spoke in depth and we began at the beginning of spiritual conversion, of conversion of the heart, that we've discussed as the topic of metanoia. And you find that constantly we've looked at the human being, whether that's from a philosophical perspective and whether that's just on the basis of looking at our actions and deeds that we do throughout our daily lives. And we found that there is a continuous battle between good and evil within our very soul. And that's why you find that when I mention soul, I use it loosely for the reason that there is a difference between our tabi'ah and our fitra, which are two different things. As in, you'll remember in the first lecture that I gave to you, and now we're going to intertwine these whole series and present a summary for it within today's and tomorrow's lectures. And you find that we mentioned tabi'ah and fitra at the beginning. And tabi'ah is the reference to the animalistic aspect of the human being known as the nafs. And we said fitra is what we want to refer to fitra as the ruh, as the divine aspect of the human being that leads us to do good deeds and not evil deeds. And you find that primarily that is the difference between angels, humans and animals. That you find angels themselves are completely made of ruh. That you find that they are told what to do and they do it. There's no if or buts about it. And therefore you find that's why an angel can never increase in its status or decrease in its status. Why? Because when it is told to do something, it will do it, and that is it. And you find an animal is that thing when it doesn't have a concept of command. It doesn't have a concept of, there's an order or there's a logical way of doing something. An animal is working on the basis of what? Of its desires. If it sees food, it eats it. Yes? If it wants to do something else, it'll do it. And therefore you find that there's always a risk of having an animal. It doesn't matter how highly trained the animal is. There's always a risk of having an animal. Why? How many children do we know that will be killed every year because of animal attacks? This is home animals. Animals that have been trained and taught. You find that there's always a risk with an animal. And indeed, likewise, the human being, you find that we are a balance between the two. Neither are we completely ruh, and neither are we completely tabi'ah, instinct, animalistic instinct. And you find that we are a combination of the two. So it's not a case of us being natural, or indeed being unnatural. Because if you see as angels as something unnatural because they are told what they do and they do it just like that. And you see animals as natural. So it needs to be a balance, like they say yin and yang. So it's not a matter of being completely natural, being like an animal, or completely unnatural and mechanical. But it's a balance of being natural, unnatural, naturalness, isn't it? So there needs to be a balance of the two. And therefore you find that sometimes when we go towards our prayers and we go towards our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's exactly what happens to us. We become very mechanical. We become unnatural. That we don't pray for the sake of getting closest to Allah, rather we pray because it's a loan on our heads and we have to get rid of the loan. Yes, otherwise we have to taste the fire of hell. And therefore you find that the reality of the soul is very simple. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran in chapter 12 verse 53, He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Inna nafsa la'amaratum bisu'i illa ma rahima rabbi. That surely your soul is inclined towards evil except the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not given, but it is taken. So Muhammad, what do you mean it's taken? It's taken through your good deeds. See, there's one thing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you the mercy without you doing anything. You are gifted the mercy. No. I promise you, even Ali Muhammad were not gifted the mercy. No. You find that their parents worked for that mercy. The prophets worked for that mercy. Why? As in, the perfect example is given. You look at, for example, some of the children of Nuh. They are. One of them specifically is a kafir. As in, he disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, come on my boat. He said to his son, come on the boat, come on the ship, come on the yacht. Come on that. But he said, no, I'm not going to go to the top of the mountain. The water won't touch me. He says, you're not going to listen to your father? He said, I'm not going to listen. So he goes to the top, and what happens? What happens to anyone who doesn't listen? He drowns. He drowns, and he dies as a disbeliever. So you find that there's this thing there where the soul is in continuous struggle within itself. And indeed, the soul has many different levels. Now for me to go deeper into the discussion, first I have to tell you what the basics are, right? So therefore, you have to know that the soul is on different levels. The first level is amaratul bisu'i. That you find that there's nafsul amara. That nafsul amara is that nafs where you are continuously going towards evil. That as in you see evil when you do it. That there's no concept of stopping yourself. And you do not feel guilty that when you do that deed as well. So for example, I'll smoke that which I should not be smoking. As in, you use some substances or inject something that I shouldn't be injecting. I'll inject that substance to my body and I won't feel any sorrow about it. I'll be like, so what difference does it make? It's just another liquid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us rizq. We make the liquid with the rizq of Allah. What's the problem? As in, this is the logic that we like to use. But you find, no, there are certain things permitted and certain things that are impermissible. And you find that this is the issue that we have, that nafsul amara is that we continuously and we don't care. Then you have the next level up, which is nafsul amara. So now, nafsul lawama says what? Nafsul lawama says that, look, let's say on Friday night, we went out, we done some things that we shouldn't be doing. I woke up the next morning and I felt guilty. Then I felt something sickening within my very being. I said, you know what, I shouldn't have done that. So then I go towards the prayer mat and I say astaghfar from my heart, I cry from my heart, and I, inshallah, I make the decision never to go back to that thing. That's nafsul lawama. But then you find in nafsul lawama there's this constant battle of doing it, then coming back, doing it, then coming back. You know, you're stuck in that sort of circle. As in, like I mentioned yesterday, isn't it, that you're stuck into the food circle as well, isn't it? Yes? I'm sure you remember when I said to you that when we talk about gluttony, those people who continuously eat, and you say, you know, he says, why do you eat? He says, I eat because I'm sad, and I'm sad because I eat. I said, it's a vicious circle, you know, I'm eating because I'm sad, and I'm sad because I'm eating, so I continue eating, and mashallah, you know, look like one of those sumo wrestlers from China or something. And you find that they're proud of their body in certain cases. They say, brother, don't you know how many years I worked on this beautiful figure of mine? I'm sure the other people would say different. But you find that this is what it is. It's nafsul lawama. There's a vicious circle that you're going back and forth, sinning and then coming back, sinning and then coming back. And you find in certain cases there's no sincerity in that, as in, like we mentioned yesterday about the issue of the night before, of the issue of asking for forgiveness. Now when you ask for true forgiveness, you find that then you don't go back to the thing. You make a conscious decision to stop. You don't keep going back and forward. That you made a decision, that's it, that decision is final. We're not going to go back and forward now. And therefore it's a concept of sincerity. Do we have sincerity when we ask for forgiveness? So this is the concept of nafsul lawama. So you're always in this constant battle between good and evil. And then you find the next level out from that is nafsul mutma'inna. That nafs which is what? At peace with itself. That nafs, and within nafsul mutma'inna there are different levels as well. And we'll talk about that in a few moments. But you find that the basic level of nafsul mutma'inna is what? That you are at peace with yourself. And the most highest level is what? Is the case that where you say that I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before I do something, during it and afterwards, like Amir al-Mu'mineen had said. That you find that that's the level of nafsul mutma'inna, that when you see or you are invited towards a sin, you turn your face away. That when someone says to you, let's go, for example, look, there's majlis of Aba Abdullah, let's go here, and then you have a choice between, you know, majlis of Aba Abdullah and listening to some guy say a few things about other people and doing a bit of ghiba and, you know, this and that and backbiting and, you know, all the different flavors of life, you know. Then you find instead of picking that, you pick the majlis of Aba Abdullah because you feel that there's a spiritual purification when you come here, that there's something different about when you come towards and sit in the majlis of Aba Abdullah. So you find that that level will be the level of nafsul mutma'inna. Now, you find like the human body has different faculties. You have the faculties, different faculties within ourselves, different systems within ourselves. You have the digestive system, you have the nervous system, the muscular system, and all the different systems. Likewise, your soul has 4 faculties. So your soul, when I refer to soul, I'm using the term loosely to look at that soul, which is a combination of your tabi'ah and your fitrah. So you find that the first level that we speak about is desire. So the faculty of desire, and the faculty of anger, and the faculty of reason. And you find the faculty of imagination. Each of these faculties can work for and against us. And I'm sure each and every one of you already know this, but it's good to sort of reminisce over these things sometimes. So you find that when you look at the faculty of anger, your anger can be used to what? It can be used to save someone who's being attacked in the street, but that same anger can be used to slap your father, slap your mother. You shouldn't be doing that. But you find that at another level, you can use your imagination for what? You can use your imagination to plan against people in the mosque, create fitna in the mosque, be hypocrites within the mosque, and cause problems in the mosque. But that same imagination can be used to build a beautiful mosque, build a wholesome community where each and every one of us love each other. It brings it back to the point of sincerity. Now, each and every one of us are here for the message of Baba Abdullah. We're here to purify our souls and help each other to get towards the spiritual conversion. How are we supposed to do that? The way we're supposed to do it is helping one another. Not just in Muharram, but outside of Muharram. How many times has it been that outside of Muharram we go towards the music and the places where we shouldn't be and the substances that we shouldn't use? When it comes towards Muharram, the brothers ask each other, brother, why are you not praying? Brother, why is it that we're not coming close to Islam? Brother, why is it that in the midst of the night we are discussing different topics, such as tawassul? We are looking at, for example, our core beliefs, and we are trying to understand Tawheed and Imamah and Nabuwah and Ma'ad, and for example, all these other things. Where you find outside the month of Muharram, we don't care. Outside the month of Ramadan, we don't even want to know about Islam. See, that imagination can be used wisely, but it must be used just like everything else, because everything is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you'll be answered. You have to answer for it. And you find that another one is desire. See, we talked about desire. And we talked about how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam he says that even when you eat food, do not eat in excess. Do not eat in excess. Why? Rasulullah, why should we not eat in excess? It's halal. The food is halal, prepared by our beautiful mothers, read Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, named Lady Fatima before she cooked. It says because eating excessively, even of the halal foods, causes our hearts to become blind. And that's why the sixth Imam, and I've mentioned this yesterday as well, but just to reiterate that the sixth Imam says that if your constant preoccupation is that of your stomach, then your value is what comes out of your stomach. That's your value. So you find that these are the things that we need to focus on. That when we look at food, we shouldn't look at food with lust. Someone says to me, Muhammad, what are you talking about lust? Lust is when you look at the opposite gender. I say, no, you can even look at food with lust. This food looks nice, so you taste it. Oh, it tastes nice too. So what happens then? And you find it's like this person's never been given food in his life. As in he attacks the food like a lion attacks a deer. You think to yourself, this guy never heard of a knife and fork or anything. He's using two hands in and out, both sides, everything's covered, his clothes, everything's dirty. Then what's wrong with you, brother? Never seen food in your life. Then what's wrong with you? But you find that this is what desire does to you. It makes you an animal, isn't it? That's why you have to keep these things under control. And that's why I remember a beautiful story that there were a few men and they were picking up boulders. I'm sure those of you who go gym can relate to this story. As in, I can't see very many people here that go gym, unfortunately. But you find that, there was people picking up stones, as in big boulder stones, yes, big boulders. You find that they were picking up big boulders, and there was one man, he's picking up one very large boulder, and another man picking up a very small boulder. I'm sure you would have matched the small boulder people. But you find that they're picking up these boulders, and Rasulullah comes and he said, Ya Rasulullah, how are you? I said, Alhamdulillah, very well. How's things? Okay. So what are you doing here? He says, we're picking up boulders. He says, Rasulullah, can you judge between us? As in, who can pick up, the biggest boulder? As in, I don't understand why the Prophet of God is being asked to judge. If you can pick up the big boulder, you're the strongest. It's simple as that. It's not logic. It's not rocket science. Just to show off, because the Prophet of God, he's leader of the community, he's got money, and the companions, mashallah, sometimes they see money like Battle of Uhud and they run after, and the Prophet's wishes go down the drain, as it were, in that case, wasn't it? Yes? So you find that what happens is that they want to show off to the Prophet, and he said, listen, I see, mashallah, you pick up the boulders, but the strongest amongst you is not the one who can pick up the boulders. The strongest amongst you is the one who can control his nafs. And control his nafs. And that's why I'll never forget the line when someone said, he said to him, he said, brother, I can bench 120 kg in the gym. He said, brother, can you bench your duvet when it's time for Fajr? He said, yeah, inshallah, sometimes. So you find that the strength sometimes does not avail us. Why? Because we have allowed our nafs to get out of control. As in some people, you see them, mashallah, they'll have bodies like no other bodies. They'll have muscles like no other muscles. So it's a different discussion whether that's, using other substances to make their muscles bigger, or this natural. It's a different subject, definitely. Inshallah, we have a lecture on that as well. But you find that they have all these muscles, they have all this beautiful body, but you find they haven't worked on their souls. As in, this is what I mean, that we need to go hand in hand. It's not natural unnaturalness or unnatural unnaturalness, but you need to put this together. That this should be, yes, you should have a beautiful body. Why? Because how else can, people like Malik al-Ashtar, Amir al-Mu'mineen kill thousands in the battlefield? As in, there has to be some sort of physical aspect there. And there's many ahadith that say that Hazrat Abbas, for example, and Ali al-Akbar, they used to teach, for example, Qasim and Own and Muhammad fencing. As in, they did do this work. And you find that that's what we need to do. We need to focus, because if we can't bench press our duvet at the time of Fajr, then what's the point of benching 120 kg? There's no point. Or for example, I can do this and I can jump this and back flip and front flip, and when someone walks into the room, my eyes are glued to them like, I don't know what. You find that we need to focus on our souls. Because like we've mentioned time and time again over these nights, that when you want to convert yourself spiritually, then you need to understand that who are you trying to go towards? You are trying to go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'll never forget that example that I gave you of Mullah Sadra, where he gives that example. He says, you are a mirror and you need to reflect the diamond that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll remember the example. And you find that if there's a problem in the mirror, the creation in the mirror in the first place, the creation means what? That if there's a problem with the tarbiyah that your father and mother gave you, there'll be a problem in reflecting the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There'll also be a problem if there's a veil between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of things that you thought about in your head. There'll be a problem of you reflecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you cannot have a clean heart, if there's rust on your heart because of you sinning. And you'll also have a problem, why? You'll also have a problem if you're reflecting the wrong thing. That the diamond, which is Allah, you will reflect the attributes of Allah, but you're focused on the worldly life. You're focused on your friends, you're focused on other people, even your family, even your children. إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالَكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your possessions, your children, they are a test for you.
Can I go to toilet, Daddy?
Have we focused on these things? Many of us, we don't come towards the mosque because of our possessions, because of our businesses, because of our education, because of our children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that these things are a test for you. But will you be able to push yourself to the limits? How many people do we know that they don't come towards the message of Abu Abdullah because it's a little bit more difficult for them tomorrow? Isn't it? It's a little bit difficult to wake up in the morning. One sister asked me. We go to sleep after Fajr and have to wake up for Zuhrain prayers as well. I've been surviving on 4 or 5 hours sleep this whole Muharram. Do you see me complaining? I said, come here and do what I need to do. We need to stop making excuses for ourselves, because excuses will kill us. And by kill us, I mean they will kill our fitra, they will kill our souls. And if we allow that to happen, then how do we expect to move forward? And you find that, this constant battle will carry on within ourselves. Carry on and carry on. But someone asked me the question, he said, Muhammad, when you look at this concept of philosopher, and you look at this concept of arif, or a person who's a Gnostic, as in when you look at these two concepts, they're very similar in nature, aren't they? As in both of them are trying to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I said, yes, they are. But not in terms of reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are both gaining knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Slightly different. So you find you have a philosopher on one side and you have a Gnostic on one side. And I want you guys to understand this point, because people have this confusion between the two. They think a philosopher is a Gnostic and a Gnostic is a philosopher, but they're two different things. And how are they two different things? On the first level is that the Gnostic wants enlightenment through the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But a philosopher is someone who is rational and someone who is just gaining knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not in the sense of becoming enlightened, completely enlightened. Because a Gnostic is one who focuses on what? On purification of the soul. A philosopher is one who uses his mental, as in he uses his mental expedition, he uses his mental brain to come up with rational arguments to prove Allah's existence, to understand Allah's existence. A Gnostic is not in the game of understanding per se, but is in the game of getting closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's his primary focus. And therefore you find that a person who is a philosopher will see someone who does not have knowledge, not necessarily of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not have knowledge of philosophy and the philosophical constructs. He will see them as ignorant. But a Gnostic says that even though a man may not have that complete knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he's purified his heart, he can still reach closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore you have a few things. Firstly, you have a Zahid. A Zahid is what? A Zahid is a man who is disciplined in not indulging in the world. So sometimes, you see those people in Iraq or Syria or Afghanistan or Pakistan, and all they do is they spend their days in the mosque. As in, they grow their beards and they wear these clothes for the rest of their lives. And they grow everything and they don't clean up, and mashallah, the smell is going one way and the smell is going the other way. And sometimes you'll stand next to them in prayer and you think to yourself, Ya Allah, I want to especially focus on Allah when I got this guy standing next to me, yes? And sometimes it's not a case of this one, sometimes it's a case of this. I say, brother, why do you eat curry before you stand next to me? Yes? All I can smell is your curry, the chilies are coming to my eyes, I'm not crying because of your breath. Ya Allah. But you find that Zahid is the one who is completely indulged in trying to what? In trying to discipline himself. And sometimes you find that through this discipline, he goes the wrong way. Isn't it true? Sometimes they go the wrong way. And you find another person is the Abid, is the worshipper. So this person is not necessarily a Zahid who's completely going away from the world. Abid is the one who involves himself in the world, but he remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at each hurdle. But both of these are not Gnostics. See, a Gnostic is the one who's gaining closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say, Muhammad, what do you mean? Say, look, an Abid, a worshipper, right? He can be a Zahid, but he may not necessarily be a Gnostic. But a Gnostic, he can be a Zahid and he can be an Abid. Understand the difference? I'll explain to you. So you find that what's happening here is you have a person who's a worshipper, who's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and obviously he's doing his worship, but he's like a businessman. He deals with the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like, this is halal, this is haram, and that's fine. He doesn't go further than that. Yes, he doesn't go further than that. Halal, haram, fiqh, that's it, no problem. So brother, what about ikhlaq? Don't worry about ikhlaq. I'm an abid, I'm not interested in anything else. I'm a person who focuses on what? Focuses on the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Halal, haram, haram, that's it. There's no other thing. The Zahid is the one, he's not involved in the world, he doesn't come outside. Abid is the one who goes outside, he's still involved in the world, but he's more concerned with halal and haram. A Gnostic is the one what? Now, it's very important. A Gnostic is the one what? He says that when I go out and eat, I'm not going to go out and eat. Why? Because I don't know whether the food is halal or haram. I'm not going to go out and eat. Why are you not going to go out and eat? Because there's music there, it's going to affect my soul. 2. See, an Abid is the one who will go out and eat. Halal and haram. He'll not concentrate on passive sinning. Passive sinning. So passive sinning, we've mentioned over the last few nights, is a very simple concept. That when you go out, you're passively sinning. It's affecting your soul, but there's not something that is haram or halal. You won't be punished for it per se. So you find that this person who's a Gnostic, although he'll be involved in the world, he'll restrict himself. So for example, he'll say, you know what? There's this piece of clothing that I want. And if I go towards the town centre, I know that there's going to be haram there, there's going to be flesh there. A flesh that not necessarily I want to see and I don't want it to affect my soul. So he'll turn around and say what? He'll say, you know what, I'll order it online, get it delivered to my house. We have Amazon Prime nowadays, next day delivery. I'm not doing any advertisements, I'm just saying. But you find that, you have that. You have that, and he tries to minimize the damage to his spirit. Whereas Abid is the one who's like, halal, haram, I'm going to go out, Casper's, creams, hair, this, and lila, and everywhere. We're going to go everywhere, no problem. Right? Unless it's haram to get there, yes? And obviously then you have the other guy who's a Zahid who, all he wants to do is stay in the mosque and not wash. Yeah? I'll give you an example. It's a bit extreme example, but it's an example nonetheless. And you find that this person, he wants to stay in the mosque, he doesn't want to involve himself in the wars, he's not interested in anything, all he's thinking about, clothes, no clothes, food, no food, doesn't matter, I want to be in the mosque, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously within the school of Ali Muhammad, we don't necessarily agree with that. So you have all these individuals. Now, what are we trying to be? See, this is the big question, isn't it? Because I had a long discussion, 4-hour discussion on this. What are we trying to be? See, look, you have an option. The reality is none of us are going to be Zahid here. That's just the way it is. Because we have to work, we've got education and whatnot. See, there's a level. You want to be an Abid, halal, haram. That's fine. That's your decision. You can make the decision. Now, if you want to be an Abid and a Gnostic, because a Gnostic and Abid, they go hand in hand. Because you have to do the worship in order to be a Gnostic. But the Gnostic pushes himself where he goes beyond halal and haram. So he looks at mustahab and makruh. And then he looks at other things that are beyond mustahab and makruh. Does the person pray whilst they're making my food? Because then if they don't pray, then it's makruh to eat that food. Then there's this issue of spirituality that go beyond. So you have to decide where you want to be within this spectrum. Everyone can make their own decision. So this is the area where we need to make that decision for ourselves, and I cannot make that decision for anyone else, because I'm here to tell you, in a sense, what to do and how to do it. But then it's up to you what you want to do after that. And you find that there's a very beautiful story by a man by the name of Sa'di. Now this man by the name of Sa'di, he narrates a story, and he says that somebody was criticizing Sultan Mahmud Ghazia. So he's criticizing the Sultan, and he says that there's a man by the name of Ayaz. There's a man by the name of Ayaz, and he's not necessarily beautiful, and neither is he good looking or anything like that. And one of the people he says, Sultan, as in, why are you so fond of this man? As in, when you look at the rose, you love the rose because of its beauty or its smell. This guy, neither does he have beauty, and obviously you can't comment on his smell. I'm sure you never got that close to him, right? So you find that, why do you like this person? He turns around and he says, listen, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story. Because when we look at the heart of someone, and we look at this spiritual conversion or this spiritual revolution, then we need to look at the heart of someone and where it lies. So we have this concept of rizq and razik. The problem is, like I said, night after night, that we love the rizq and we forget about the razik. In certain cases, the rizq is our razik, in certain cases, unfortunately. But you find that he says, look, we were going through a narrow passage, and in the narrow passage, I had a camel. Now this camel had what? It had gold and silver and jewelry upon it. Back in the day they used to have that there. And he's going towards some area, and they go through a narrow passage, and the camel begins to lose its balance, and the jewelry and the gold and all the precious jewels fall on the ground. Now, you find that the Sultan doesn't care about it. The Sultan doesn't care. He's probably got hundreds and thousands of boxes of gold, right? No? And if he doesn't care, he goes forward, he keeps going, he doesn't look back, he hears it fall, he doesn't care, he keeps moving forward. Now you find all of his inventory, all of his servants and all the people there, they begin to jump on the gold. As in sometimes in Pakistan and Iraq, you'll see that if someone drops money, everybody comes. And it's like a free fall. Certain cases, even in weddings, you know, when the buffet time is, mashallah, everyone forgets who's uncle, who's auntie, everyone's first. Yeah? You know, sometimes when you're sitting in the gathering amongst the brothers, you know, uncle please, uncle please. Where's uncles on wedding days? Yeah? That's the question. It's issues of the nafs, I'm telling you. But you find that this way is that the gold fell, everyone attacked the gold, and then Ayaz, instead of attacking the gold, what does he do? He goes with Sultan. So Sultan and Ayaz now are all alone. Sultan turns around to Ayaz and says, Ayaz? Says, yes, O master. He says, what did you pick up from the gold? He says, Master, do I have permission to speak? He says, yes, you have permission to speak. He says something very beautiful. He says, I am following your majesty, and I am a servant of your majesty. And my service, I paid no attention to anything other than you. Now Sa'di, he narrates, he says something very beautiful. He says, the one who is selfish is the one who has an eye on the generosity of his friend, but not on his friend. It's a very important point there. See, many of us here, what do? We talk about the generosity. My friend, his generosity is like this. So not necessarily talking of the friend. We love that aspect of the friend, but do we truly love the friend himself? Brings the point of the razq and the rizq. As if we love the blessings of rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but do we love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We cry over the story of Abu Abdullah, what happened to him. But do we cry for him because he is Abu Abdullah, because he is the grandson of the Prophet, because he has a close place and a station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? These two different crying. See, there's crying for a story, there's crying for a movie, there's crying because you listen to some words of poetry about love and tears become to come to your face. And then there's crying because you realize the station of someone. You realize what his position is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's two different cryings. And that's why I'll always remember al-Baneen. So Muhammad, why will you always remember al-Baneen? Once he says, you know when al-Baneen, the mother of Al-Abbas, she was in Medina. So after Karbala happened, Nainawa happened, Ashura happened, everything was done and dusted, they went back. They went back to Medina, didn't they? So when they went back to Medina, brothers and sisters, you find that one of the most difficult things to do at that point is what? Is to inform Abdullah bin Ja'far what happened. Is to inform al-Baneen what happened. So they say that one person comes towards al-Baneen. And I want you to understand this is true love. Because we've never understood love. Brothers and sisters, I ask you to put Hazrat Yusuf's story to the side. I ask you to put Romeo and Juliet to the side and listen to what I'm about to say here. al-Baneen is there. Someone comes to al-Baneen. The person says, oh al-Baneen. She says, yes. Says, do you know what happened in Karbala? She says, no, I do not know. The person turns around and says to al-Baneen, he says, something beautiful happened. What happened? He said, I give salam to Abdullah. She says, tell me about Hussaini. She says, that man says, I give salam to Uthman. She says, tell me about Al-Hussain. The man says, I give salam to Aun. She says, tell me about Hussain. The man says, he says, I give salam on the hands of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. They say at this point al-Baneen fell down. She began to cry. And in the state of crying, she says, tell me about Al-Hussain. The The man says that your Abu al-Fadl's hands were cut for Abu Abdullah. And after the hands of Abu al-Fadl were cut, then the head of Abu Abdullah was cut. al-Baneen says one line that will always stay with me. She turns around and says, oh man, I would sacrifice 70 Abbas just to see the head of Abu Abdullah. Brothers and sisters, she wasn't the only mother. We'll say, al-Baneen, you didn't see what happened in Karbala, you only heard the stories. Let me tell you a story of a mother by the name of Ramla. They say Ramla said to Qasim, Qasim, isn't it time for you to go towards Abu Abdullah? They say on two separate occasions Qasim goes towards Abu Abdullah, and Abu Abdullah says, oh Qasim, how can I let you go? You remind me of my brother Hassan. Don't forget the second Imam. Brothers and sisters, your third Imam has a golden dome over his grave. Your second Imam only has a rock. That when you go towards the grave of Abu Abdullah, people say to you, come in. When you go towards the grave, when you go towards the grave of the second Imam, you know what they say to you? They say, leave from here. They say on two separate occasions, Qasim goes towards Abu Abdullah. And Abu Abdullah says, how can I let you go? You are the son of Hassan, my brother. How can I let you go? They say, Ramla says, give this message to Abu Abdullah. He goes back and he says, oh Abu Abdullah, I have a message from my mother Ramla. I have a message from my mother Ramla. He says, what is the message? He says, my father said that my sons will represent me and give their lives for you, oh my brother Hussain. Do not stop them to go towards the battlefield. Abu Abdullah asked, oh Qasim, how do you find death? He replies, I see death sweeter than honey. They say Abu Abdullah begins to put the turban around Qasim. Do you know whose turban this is? This is the second Imam's turban, brothers and sisters. And that second Imam, do you know what happened to that second Imam? That his body was covered by the duvet, and you find out what happened. He was given poison by his wife. And they say all the other Imams, they died a day or a couple of days after they were given poison. You find that Imam al-Hassan, when he was given poison, he died on the same day. They say he was coughing out his liver, and there was a blood in the bowl of Abu Abdullah. The bowl was going towards Imam al-Hassan, and when he gave him the bowl, the blood would go into the bowl. And they say at one point, Imam al-Hassan hears some footsteps coming towards him. He says, oh Abu Abdullah, I ask you to cover the bowl for my sister Zainab is coming towards me. I would say, oh Imam al-Hassan, you are so worried about your sister Zainab. What about when she has to witness Qasim fall? When she has to witness Abu Abdullah fall? Oh brothers and sisters, say Lady Zainab come towards Imam al-Hassan. And when she comes towards Imam al-Hassan, say Qasim goes towards the battlefield and his armor is too big, his shoes are too big. He goes towards the battlefield and fights valiantly. And at the moment you find that his sandal tears and he goes down to fix his sandal. A man comes and strikes Qasim down. When he strikes Qasim down, he says, "Oh, my uncle Abu Abdullah, where are you?" He calls out for his uncle and his uncle comes towards him. Abu Abdullah comes towards Qasim and places his head on his knee and says, "Oh Qasim, how is it that you call me and I do not come? And if I do not come, and if I come, then it is of no avail to you." They say Qasim is there, and Qasim's head is upon the lap of Abu Abdullah. They say he takes the body of Qasim. I would say, "Oh Abu Abdullah, who will take your body back towards the ladies who will bury your body? Today you bury Qasim, you bury Akbar, you bury Abbas, who will bury the body of Abu Abdullah." They say when a time comes, Abu Abdullah, he fights very valiantly. He comes to his knees. When he's on his knees, men come towards him and they strike him with swords. They strike him with arrows. They strike him with spears. They throw stones at Abu Abdullah and he's there sitting on the ground. A man comes towards Abu Abdullah. A man comes towards Abu Abdullah. You find a small child by the name of Abdullah bin Hassan comes running out of the tent. He comes running out of the tent towards Abu Abdullah and he says, "Oh man, you have corrupted your soul. Do not attack my uncle." They say he runs towards Abu Abdullah. And when he runs towards Abu Abdullah, brothers and sisters, he comes to Abu Abdullah. And when he comes towards Abu Abdullah, he says, "Oh, small child of my brother, why have you come out here? What are you doing amongst the battle?" He says, "I have come to protect you, Abu Abdullah." They said the man was about to strike the head of Abu Abdullah. Abdullah was there. They say he used his arm to protect the head of Abu Abdullah and his arm was cut. He falls into the lap of Abu Abdullah and he says, "Oh my uncle, I'm sorry I could not help you further." They say they were talking and Hurmala Mal'oon, he let an arrow go from far away which struck the chest of Abdullah bin Hassan. I would say, "Oh Abu Abdullah, he came to your aid, but when you were in your final moment, Shimmer was on your chest." And brother says, "Do you know what happened when Shimmer was on the chest?" Usually when you cut the throat of any animal,